Hello, my name is Marcus Weesaw, and today I'd like to go over with you a little bit about MW Consulting and our client consulting model. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@mwconsultingllc.com or visit us at our web address, www.osha.training. Or if you're one of those individuals that still likes to talk on the phone, that's fine. Call us at 307 463 0037. Let's go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to present just a little bit of information about us. MW Consulting LLC is headquartered in Fort Washakie, Wyoming on the Wind River Indian Reservation and was established in 2009. The company has been certified by the Department of Veterans Affairs as a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. We have been certified by the National Minority Development Council as a minority business enterprise and by the Department of Transportation as a disadvantaged business enterprise, or DBE. Now, I'd like to discuss a little bit of the governing principles on our consulting process and the emphasis we place upon our work with respect to every consulting engagement we get. So typically, as you probably have garnered so far from taking a peek at our website or discussing some of your organizational needs with us, we focus on risk management as a predominant theme. So what do we mean by risk management? Well, we look at what is your risk of losses in terms of workers' compensation premiums, or we look at what your risk is in terms of liability for injuries that may occur on contractors' locations and other things like that. We also focus on competitive advantage, and this is something that is really garnering a lot of emphasis these days, and smart companies are looking at their safety performance as one angle of competitive advantage. In fact, if you are writing any requests for proposal responses, or if you're engaged in the competitive bidding process, you'll see a lot of times organizations are requesting safety performance metrics and other indicators as part of that bid. So our emphasis remains that we try to get you in the best possible position in order to beat out the competition with your safety record. Thirdly, we look at organizational behavior. We would like to evaluate exactly how your organization behaves. So how are decisions being handled? So for example, no safety program could ever really be fully implemented without the full support of executive level management. So we found this to be true over and over again. So looking at how safety is implemented within an organization and how the associated policies and procedures are implemented really means the difference between a successful safety protocol, a successful safety program, as opposed to one that's not so successful. So let's talk about diagnostic assessment for a second. We do many diagnostic assessments in our consulting model. And what this means is sometimes organizations that come to us with a certain problem, they don't know what their problems are. They know, for example, that their experience modification rating, or EMR, from workers' compensation is quite high. They know that they're losing money. They know that they've got a lot of injuries on the job site, but they just don't know where to begin. Well, we assist in this process, and we help organizations figure out where the pain points are, and then we look at how do we account for these pain points. So if we've got a lot of problems within an organization, what do we start with first? So we kind of look at the severity, the frequency, and a lot of other different factors in order to properly diagnose the problem. And once we have done that, then we can go and look for a solution. Finally, strategic planning. Strategic planning is just that. We can't just say our safety and health initiatives are implemented in 2015 and that they're just going to stay that way on autopilot. It doesn't work that way. So successful organizations say, well, here are our health and safety objectives? How do we keep these objectives in mind and change these objectives as our organizational needs change in moving forward? So what's true and what works today in 2015 may not work in 2016. For example, we may see a regulation change, and so we have to essentially reevaluate exactly how we've been doing things to comply with those regulations. So those are the major emphases of our consulting process and how we evaluate every single client that approaches us with some type of problem in the consulting engagement. So I hope that helps you with a background on our approach. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about corporate objectives in terms of how we implement our services into your corporate objectives. Well, it's quite simple. Number one, we know that companies are always focused on profit enhancement and risk reduction. Those two go hand in glove. So I'll talk about both briefly. So profit enhancement, how do we help companies become more profitable? Well, we help lower certain costs like workers' compensation premiums. We help reduce costs by figuring out better ways, for example, to analyze personal protective equipment, for example. That's a really good one. A lot of companies spend a lot of money on personal protective equipment, and they may focus there, and we might step in and say, actually, if you do an engineering control measure, such as whatever it may be, we could save you a significant amount of money. Sure, your initial capital outlay is higher. Let's say we implement an exhaust system to remove inhalation hazards within a certain company setting. And so we eliminate the entire need to have respiratory protection in the first place. And that's allowable in many cases. So sure, we may have some initial outlay there, but if we take away the PPE requirement for wearing respirators, well, we've just eliminated that cost time and time again, and we can move forward. That also reduces risk, enhances health and safety. So that's just one example of how we would combine profit enhancement with risk reduction. And we do so many other things as well, but I'll be brief there and move on. Thirdly, we like to look at regulatory compliance as always a major corporate objective. Regulatory compliance is crucial. So what I mean by this is we look at OSHA requirements, we look at EPA requirements, DOT requirements, and in some cases we look at state and local requirements in addition to that. Well, how do we meet these requirements? These requirements are not necessarily recommendations. They're not guidelines. They're legal, and companies who employ personnel must comply. So I'll leave that there. Next, let's talk a little bit about trends analysis. So how do we know where we're heading? How do we know if our injury rates are on par with other organizations within our industry type? So we look at this and we say, well, let's look at the trends. Let's take a longitudinal approach and let's see how you're doing since, say, 2010. And we kind of figure out these are your incident metrics in 2010 all the way up to date to 2015. And let's see where we're trending. And let's see where the industry itself is trending. And let's look for areas of opportunity for improvement. So trends analysis is very, very important. And it's something that we like to tie in with your corporate objectives. And in addition to this, safety metric improvement, or these incident metrics that I was just referring to, that kind of ties in with trends analysis, except sometimes when our safety metrics, like our TRIR, or total recordable incident rate, exceeds the national average according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we look at that, and we say, well, we need to get these metrics lower. And how do we do that? Well, again, it goes back to identifying those pain points and figuring out what they are so we can start with this diagnosis process and move forward to a potential solution that must be implemented. So we do try to offer suggestions and recommendations on how organizations can improve their safety metrics. We also try to streamline safety audits and inspections. So when we step into an organization and we arrive, if we're doing an audit or if we're acting as a consultant and we're helping you through an audit from a different organization like OSHA or a contractor audit or inspection. Well, what we try to do is we try to provide the support necessary to help your company position itself. Lastly, we try to align the goals that we come up with to corporate initiatives. So, for example, if your goal is to reduce your TRIR, then we try to align that goal with your corporate initiative. So, if you're going to be going after more work, if you're going to have to increase your manpower by 200 personnel by the fourth quarter of 2015, we take our safety goals, our health goals, and we implement that tied into your corporate initiatives, and then we just ball it all up. That way it's one streamlined, easier process because we're all on the same page. Often what I find in organizations is that we have one department or one division that has its own goals, and we have another that has its own goals, and they don't always correspond. They don't always agree. And then that leads to additional problems, some problems that often are left unresolved. So that's kind of how we tie in your corporate objectives in terms of our safety consulting engagements. I hope that helps in terms of your understanding. So what is our role in a consulting engagement? Well, firstly, we try to act as an effective change agent. And I know that's kind of a buzzword, but what we do as a change agent is we say no organization can be stagnant. It can't just go on autopilot and expect improvement. So what we try to do is we say, well, here's 1, 2, 3, or 4 things that you can do to make an immediate improvement. And we try to facilitate these changes. And that's really all there is to it. Secondly, we try to implement your programs, policies, and training to align with those corporate objectives, like I just stated in the previous slide. So keep that in mind. I won't reiterate that too much, but that is kind of one of the functions of our role. Next, we try to provide every client with an optimal return on investment from consulting services. So the consulting engagement deliverables, or whatever you're paying for, whatever outcome you'd like, we try to provide each client with the best possible return on investment. So if you invest in us, we try to give you more use value from our consulting services than dollar value. And that's really all there is to that. Next, we try to drive health and safety initiatives toward injury prevention and cost reduction. So we know that organizations have to keep costs low, and we have to keep an eye on profits to make sure that whatever health and safety initiative we have is going to be cost effective. And sometimes that's a challenge, but what we can agree on is that injury prevention is a major emphasis, and that almost always leads to some sort of cost reduction. If we're not having injuries, that's a very good thing. Lastly, we like to amplify every organization's strengths, and then we try to improve weaknesses. And hopefully this ties into that profit enhancement kind of movement where you can garner additional revenue. So this is kind of how our role fits in as a third-party consulting organization. So briefly now, I'd like to just go over our services. So firstly, we are a true consulting company. So we list these health and safety services just as a general idea of what we can offer. But if you have a problem that you think is unique, that maybe we haven't seen before, we love to take on those kind of challenges, whether they're simple or complex. So if it involves occupational health and safety, and if we feel that we're competent enough to provide a good outcome for you, we're all in. So I'd like to just go over our basic occupational health and safety services just to provide you with an idea of a general kind of scope of service. So first, we design a whole bunch of health and safety courses. We provide training and we implement these trainings. Whether we design a train the trainer course for your organization to use over and over again, or whether we do the training ourselves, it doesn't matter, we do both. We do a lot of pre-qualification services, like ISNet World, PC Premier, Pix, Construct Secure, Browse, and I think there are a few other ones that are less popular, but those are the biggest 5 that we see. We also provide assistance in contracts, master service agreements, just another way of saying contract, request for proposals, or what we call RFPs. Sometimes you see them as RFQs, and competitive bidding. So we help position your company's strengths in terms of safety performance and these kind of issues, and then we help shift liability in certain cases in contracts and help cover more bases with health and safety engagements. So keep that in mind. Next, we do a lot of safety audits, inspections, certification programs like OSHA Sharp, OSHA VPP. We do safety audits for different contractors. We do inspections for regulatory compliance. So there's all kinds of different things that we can do and that we do for our clients in terms of audits and inspections. Next, we do a lot of regulatory compliance work, citation assistance, meaning OSHA has come to your site and they have issued a citation for, let's say, a respiratory violation for respiratory protection, or maybe a machine guarding issue. So what we do is not only do we try to help minimize some of the costs to these citations, but we also help organizations comply and come up with a better plan so that they don't see these citations again and again as repeat violations. Next, I'll touch base on this briefly. We do a lot of expert witness services for different law firms and companies in terms of litigation. So that's its own thing, but I'll leave that there. And then I know I already touched on this, but we do also quite a deal. We deal with quite a lot of health and safety training in addition to that. So I hope that helps outline some of the things that we do. And again, if you see something that's not quite on this list, or maybe you don't know what's on this list, you're unfamiliar with what ISNet World is or whatever, feel free to just call us and we can talk about it a little bit more. And always, going back to what I said before, sometimes we just don't understand what we need, and that's why audits are so important. So a trained professional can go into the organization, look at what's going on, audit everything, and come up with a diagnosis and a report of some of the things we can start with. So I hope that helps outline a lot for you and provide you with just a little bit of additional information. Finally, again, my name is Marcus Weesaw, and we're finally to the end of this presentation. I hope I wasn't too lengthy, but I wanted to be thorough with everyone so that if you're considering using us as your health and safety consultant, that you have kind of an idea of how we approach health and safety. So again, just to summarize in a nutshell, we try to take health and safety from an organizational stance and implement it into your organization. So if your management team is on board with supporting a full-scale health and safety protocol within the organization, and you're going to support it, and you want to implement it, but you need a little bit of help on how to keep costs low, how to keep training costs low, how to make everything work so that your organization is better, safer, and more valuable to those who you do business with, then give us a call. We'd love to talk about a proposal for consulting work, and hopefully we can agree on an engagement that works for your company, works for us. Again, my name is Marcus Weesaw. You can call us at 307-463-0037. You can visit us at www.osha.training. We do look forward to hearing from you. We hope you find this presentation valuable and have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening in.